right. That kind of had an abrupt ending. Let's get the thumbs up from everybody outside. Is it working? Are we good? I think we're good. Welcome to Digging Deeper. This is the first episode of 2025. Let's see here. We usually allow everyone 2 or 3 minutes to get in and get seated and get ready to go. This will be a live Digging Deeper today. We got thumbs up. Everything's working good.
Right.
I'm David Arsenault. I am the VP of Marketing and Director of Business Development at Randall Reilly. Julie, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Julie Arsenault, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Marketing for Randall Reilly.
All right. So today we're going to talk about marketing and recruiting trends, because marketing and recruiting intersect a lot. And so we want to talk about trends, current trends that you need to make sure that you have a grasp of, that you're incorporating into how you market to talent. And then we're each going to talk about 2 trends that you should consider. And then we'll each talk about 1 trend that you should just leave behind for good and leave it out of the future of your marketing. There is a Q&A, which we will have available for you. Looks like people have already used it. We got a bunch of thumbs up. Hey, it's working for everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. There's a Q&A there. You can ask questions throughout. The way these live ones work, sometimes we do pre-recorded episodes and they do a live Q&A at the end. The way the live episodes work, feel free to ask questions throughout, and I will feather them into what we're already talking about. Within reason. If you get way out, I may have to figure out how to work it in at some point. But at any point, feel free to chime in through the Q&A, and we'll work it into what we're talking about.
Christopher sent us an apple like we're his favorite teacher.
Yeah, well, thank you, Christopher. We will. The plan is to go for about 30 minutes, but there's no hard end. If you guys have more questions or more things you want to talk about, we'll keep going as long as you want to ask questions. But just in general, if you're looking for the what we have planned to talk about, we'll go for about 30 minutes. Thank you to everyone that has joined us. It looks like we have a lot here today. Great turnout. So we'll get going. Julie, do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I'll start, and then you can interrupt me per usual.
Well, before you start, I want to do just one poll before we get started. We're going to launch this here. I would like to know if this is your first time on Digging Deeper, but the poll is launched now. So Julie, you can go ahead and go.
All right. So my number 1 trend for 2025. This one has been coming in for a little while, but it's coming in extra hot for 2025. I have been talking to clients across every industry about starting initiatives for this trend, which is employment branding. Now, we did a Digging Deeper episode a while back on this, but I'm hearing more and more businesses talk across this, from trucking companies, medical supply, to automotive dealerships. Why? Why are they talking about this? Because we're seeing search volume decrease for jobs across almost every sector. Some of that is market related, but some of that is the candidates, the job prospects out there are getting more savvy, and they already know who they want to work for. And if it is not crystal clear in the market what your employer value proposition is, why they should work for you, you're already missing out. So any lead gen activities that you put out there are going to be less effective because they don't know who you are. And even if they do know who you are, they don't know why they should want to work for you. So this is something we've seen in the past, but it's just now gaining traction in the market. We have, with some of our clients, they rely very heavily on branded search. That's somebody searching for your name to work for you. So that would be somebody, from our perspective, saying, Randall Reilly jobs. We have had multiple clients run video campaigns that aren't work for us now, apply today. It's, hey, here's a story of one of our employees and the great experience they had and how they were able to further their career and meet their personal and professional goals and how they felt supported. And they saw a 3 times increase in their branded search, which also happens to be their most efficient cost per hire. So if you're not doing employer or employment, see it both ways, branding, you're missing out on an opportunity.
So I just ran a poll, Julie, on how important is employer branding, which I'll add this to the stage. How important, looks a little funky. How important is employer branding to you? So far, we got 58% with extremely important, and we got 41% with important, and no one has said not important. So that's good. No one said not important. One thing that we talked about when we did talk about employment branding before, employment branding, whichever, is I think people go straight to the tactics of it, which you even mentioned a little bit, the idea of, testimonial or stories from your workforce and just putting those up with the idea of increasing branded search. But one thing that we talked about last time that I found very illuminating is you said the first step to creating an employment brand is you have to create an employment value proposition, or an EVP, as people like to say. And in order to do that well, you have to get all the stakeholders in a room.
Yes.
So if you're like, we want to do employer branding well, the first thing you got to do is get all the stakeholders. Who would you include in that group of stakeholders?
You have to have hiring managers. You have to have some people have separate HR and recruiting departments. Those need to get together, and you need executive management. If you have anybody that is touching especially your high value employees that are making the business run, you need everybody that is affecting their experience. Because if you're defining why they want to work there, all of those people are going to affect it. So this is, you can't have the CEO coming on and saying, hey, we really value work-life balance. And then you have a manager that's making everybody work till 10 p.m. every night.
Right. And we talked about, I think authenticity, or the idea of authenticity, is going to come out several times throughout everything we talk about, because it's a real trend going through a lot of what we see. Anything else? Because we got to move fairly fast because we have a lot to talk about. Anything else you would add about employee branding, or any questions from the audience before we move off of this?
Well, I will say one of the things that I have noticed in talking to people in multiple industries is I'll ask them, is employer branding important to you? And they all say, yes, extremely. And I'll say, okay, are you coordinating with internal branding efforts? Like when you're giving out awards, like, are those messages synchronized? And every company I've talked to, except for one, says no. And then I asked, what is your dedicated budget for employer branding? And then I hear a lot of crickets. So extremely important, needs to come with a plan, coordination, and a budget. Okay.
We have a question that I want to ask. When it comes to employer branding, should I only focus on the positive stories and ignore the negative? If not, how do I incorporate the negatives?
So you only incorporate the negatives if you plan on doing something about the negative experience. But it can be a great experience for you to show that you listen to people, you take action, and you're in progress. Think of this as the employment talent acquisition version of when Domino's Pizza CEO came on and said, our pizza sucks, but we're going to make it better. We're listening. So it might be like, hey, we heard you, our healthcare benefits suck, but we're listening to you. Here's the steps we're taking to make them better. So you can take those negative experiences and turn them into a positive, reframe those.
Okay. Got another question on the topic. Where would you start for a smaller company on employment branding?
Okay. This is a good one. I like a good DIY, but I would go and talk to your employees that are really enthusiastic and ask not just why do you like working here, ask for stories. So if they say, well, I get to have a lot of fun, say, well, tell me about the last time you had fun. See if you can get that on video, even just vertical video, and you can run those as ads. You can share them internally to highlight that employee and share that momentum and those core values with the other employees, and then use it to say, if this sounds like a place you'd like to work, here are some real authentic stories. And it doesn't cost a lot.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see another question. So let's go ahead and pivot to, so first trend is employment branding, and it's important in driving your talent strategy. My trend, I think the trend's been growing for a while now. Anyone that's on Instagram or out in the social sphere knows about it, and that's influencer marketing.
Mhm.
The industry of influencer marketing is currently, or was in 2023, was at 24 billion being invested into influencer marketing in the US, and it is projected to be around 48 billion in 2025, I believe. So a lot of people using it. According to the stats that I've looked at, it says that brands get about $4 for every $1 they spend on influencer marketing on Instagram. All right. Now, one of the coolest trends that I found that I want to talk about is it says that by far micro influencers have the highest engagement rate. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. So when we talk about influencer marketing as it relates to everyone on the call, which I would assume most people on the call are here because they hire technicians or they hire CDL drivers, or and probably a lot of roles in that skilled labor, blue collar type of position. But one thing that I wanted to look at before we get going on this, so when we think influencer marketing, I think we generally think of, well, they want to hear from their peers, right? They want to hear from people that understand what their world is like.
So this is not getting like Sinbad to do a shout out.
I mean, it is. That's a version of it. That's a version of it. But that's where we go. That's Sinbad would be. I don't know if he is anymore, but Sinbad would be considered macro. His appeal is broad, right? But it's not niche enough. All right. So I'm going to give some statistics that are very specific to drivers that I think are very appropriate. But these are, I feel as though these statistics would ring true across most niche industries of recruiting. All right. So we did a poll among drivers. So we talk about people love to hear from their peers, and they trust their peers, right? That's the whole idea of influencer marketing. All right. When it comes to testimonial videos, right? 53% of drivers say they don't matter to them at all. And 25% of drivers said they actually had a negative effect on them.
Okay.
All right. So where do we go with that? If they don't like testimonials and some of them it's not going to be a driving motivation in whether I choose to work for somebody, where do I go with that? Well, we have to look at another stat. So when we poll the audience, drivers again, but I'm telling you, this will be true across the board. When they're searching for a job or thinking about changing jobs, what do you think, by a factor of about 3, what was the number one way drivers research jobs?
Well, I know the answer to this one, so I don't think I should answer. I think somebody should submit it in the Q&A.
Well, we'll see if they. Well, I'll go ahead, so we don't have too much suspense. Talking to other drivers. All right. So why is it that the number one way you want to find out about a job is to talk to other drivers, right? Or talk to people who are working the job at the company that you're interested in. That's the number one way. Okay. But they find testimonial videos and not to be impactful on them.
I don't know.
Because
please explain.
The whole idea of influencer marketing is you have to partner with people that already have established trust with your audience.
Okay.
So it's not giving someone that already works for you a script and asking them to read it. Now, there probably is a time and place for that. But if you want to do influencer marketing well, you have to find people that have already established trust within your audience and then partner with them, right? And the more micro you could be, so the more relevant you can make that person to the exact people. So like if you're specifically hiring mobile mechanics or mobile technicians, then if you can find a mobile technician influencer, that's better than just a general mechanic, right? If you're hiring for flatbed, you want to find a flatbed driver influencer that you can partner with. The more micro you can be, the better. All right. And then you can't change their messaging. You have to partner and with someone who already has established trust and take the good with the bad and how they present things.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Anything you would add to that?
Well, I just have a question. Is this somebody from your own fleet? If you're talking about like a driver example?
It doesn't have to be. I think that would be good if you can find someone within your fleet or someone in your garage that already has somewhat of an established presence and you have a good relationship with. That would be perfect. That would be ideal. And you could integrate your referral programs in there with them. You could give them a cut of everyone that uses their code when filling out an application. You see this with influencer marketing all the time. So that's a great opportunity to take advantage of the influence someone at your company already has, and then leverage it with your referral program. That would be a great way to do it, but it doesn't have to be. The big thing, and I don't want to stay on this too long, the big thing with influencer marketing is micro is better than macro. You have to remember that. The more niche you can be, the better. And then the second is you have to partner with people who have already established trust with your audience. That's better than we're going to try and do a scripted thing with somebody who doesn't really have an audience already.
Right.
All right. So someone added, they said micro influencers with niche audiences can drive big results. One YouTube video with 100,000 views brought 30 leads in 5 days, all organic, no ad spend. They need content and many are eager to collaborate. Don't overlook this powerful strategy. So great testimonial there from Christopher Watts. So thank you for that.
Testimonial on influencer marketing.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Now let's move on to our next one. Someone says the riches are in the it's pronounced niches, so that doesn't actually rhyme. Here's a good question. How is influencer marketing relevant to flatbedding, especially when there are stereotypes involved? So this is where I assume with flatbedding, there's a lot of I know no touch freight. People prefer no touch freight, but with flatbedding, a lot of, people having to touch the freight. There's a lot of, tarping and strapping and all that stuff. So, a little bit is, you would have to find a flatbed driver who loves the idea of he takes pride in the fact that he has to do the extra work and there's something about it. And then that has to create an audience or community around that idea. So it's probably hard to find it. I did look up last night. I started looking at the biggest trucking influencers, and there were a lot of truck drivers that have huge audiences. And I believe there were flatbed people in that audience, but are among those influencers. But that would be hard to find. I don't know if I answered that question well. If I didn't, feel free to ask it again in maybe slightly different way. But I think you have to find someone who enjoys the stereotypes of flatbedding and builds a community around that.
There was a story a couple years back. The driver of the year for one of the many organizations that names that was a woman that was talking about how much she loved jumping up there and tarping down her trailer and how it kept her in such amazing shape as she was getting older and having a wonderful time.
All right. Next. Well, before I'm going to run a quick poll on influencer marketing, see how many people are using it. But Julie, while they're answering that question, why don't you go ahead with our next 2025 trend that you need to incorporate into your marketing?
Talent as strategy, which everybody's going, I have a talent acquisition strategy. I have a recruiting strategy. And that is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about your total organization strategy. What is your business strategy? And does talent have a seat at the table? And I have seen more and more, especially there's a key difference between talent organizations that are brought into the strategic planning sessions, not just to give feedback, but to be a voice in the strategy generation, and the ones that just sit in the dark until somebody hands them and says, here's a strategy, do your part. And what happens with the ones that are sitting there waiting for their marching orders, they often get it and go, this is completely unrealistic. You want me to triple our hires with a 5% increase in budget while also increasing our higher quality. Okay, great. And we're going to expand into a new market where there's probably 5 candidates that qualify, and you're trying to start 3 new locations. So what's the difference between the ones that say, hey, we want to pick your brain about this ahead of time, and the ones that just get the marching orders? So the difference is when you have data on your talent, how it's contributing to the organization, and also market data. So you are benchmarked, you understand what is out there. So if they say, hey, I want to move into Wisconsin, you can say that is a frozen wasteland. I'm not a fan of the cold. No offense to anybody in Wisconsin. But it's a notoriously difficult place to recruit. If you have that data going in and you're actively being an advocate for the talent market and how it affects business strategy, then it makes your job easier in the long run. And it also makes your entire organization better. And for somebody like me, I would much rather be a part of building something and understanding how talent plays into that and having my peers understand how I'm contributing than being somebody who just gets like a short order cook. And I may or may not have the ingredients to fulfill.
Have you come across companies? What do you see? Like, you talk with a lot of clients.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as a big difference in the companies that incorporate their talent organization within strategy and the ones that don't?
I mean, so it's what I was saying is they have data that people need. And usually there's a little bit of back and forth at the beginning where they'll say, hey, we're going to, like, I'll use trucking as an example. We're going to take on this freight. So we need these drivers. And the head of recruiting will go back and say, hey, I looked into Stratus reporting platform, and the cost per hire there and the average pay there is a lot more competitive than what you put into your bid. So we're going to need to go back and forth. And so they start to build that trust of, hey, if you come to me before you put in that bid for that freight, we can put in a solid bid that's backed by numbers and one that I know we can fill. We can fill that. So you start to build that trust. But the biggest difference is you are getting in front of the conversation with data. If you don't have market data and you're just like, include me, then you seem like a little kid to tag along. And I will say there's also, depending on some of the organizations I've talked to, some of them are like, HR is just seen as a fluff department. Like maybe we'll do like an employee appreciation luncheon and then we like process applications. That's because you're not looking at the data for what are the company's growth goals? What is the average lifetime value of an employee? What is the average lifetime value by role? What is the average cost per hire? What is the ROI on that? Show how you are contributing to the organization. And with that, you need strategic partners who help you get there. But you can't just come in and say, look, we had 50 people show up to the company barbecue.
Right.
If you want a seat at the strategy table.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think of, so specifically in the technician world, from what we've seen, and from our own research, and then anecdotally, this has been said, this is correct back to us by hundreds of clients. An experienced technician will yield about $20,000 to $30,000 of revenue in parts and service every month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge chunk of revenue. But then because, HR talent doesn't have a seat at the table to say, this is a huge portion of our revenue. And as you know, for most, like if we look at the dealership space, parts and service is a huge contributor to the overall revenue and usually the most profitable part of the dealership. If you had that, those data points are brought that to the table, then you could say, hey, this like $300 a month that you're giving me to post on Indeed and barely reach any experienced technicians. This is actually costing us money, because if we had a more integrated talent strategy that we actually invested in, we'd be recouping all that parts and service revenue that we're losing. So that's another example that I've heard outside of the fleet audience.
And I want to say, like, talent as a strategy, I'm not saying this to all of you as people in talent acquisition as like, this is your power grab. I'm saying this is what organizations need to do to get better. And I will also say, I'm seeing more and more CEOs, COOs, including talent as part of the strategy discussion. And I think other businesses are going to start doing that. And they're going to look at their talent departments and say, why aren't you contributing to the strategy?
All right, we have a question
that
popped up that I don't want to leave behind, and it's about the employer brand part. Our company is in the early stages of developing its employer brand, and we have a fairly small team. What are some practical steps that we can take to get started?
Okay, to define your employee value proposition, I would have send out a survey to your current employees. Make it anonymous. You can do it through a third party if they've been burned in the past. And then look through there for the themes of why they actually want to work for you. Don't just go in and say, it's because of our integrity and our openness and our authenticity. Listen to what employees have to say for why they work there, because then you know when you bring people in with that message, it will work. So the very simple way to just get started with the theme, condense that, and it's about the employee and why they want to work there instead of why management thinks they should, which is where I see that get mixed up all the time, where they're like, we have a wonderful heritage. And I'm like, yeah, that's not why I'm working here.
Do you want to add anything before we move on? Did you want to add anything to talent as strategy?
No, because we're going to run out of time and you still have to do your second trend.
Yeah, and we still got to do the leave behind. So I'm going to go fast on this next one. All right. The next trend that is very important in 2025 is transparency and privacy, which almost seem opposite. But let's start with transparency. Transparency laws around salary. So I think 13 states now have laws on how you have to disclose salary ranges. They're different per state. And if you need a breakdown of it, we actually have a download on randallreilly.com. Maybe we can send out a link post this webinar. But understanding transparency laws around salary. There are restrictions around how you can advertise. There are restrictions around what has to be disclosed in the initial interview. And there's a lot of things that come up because of that. First off, if your salary or at least salary ranges are going to be public, you need to have a discussion about what those should be, what that's going to be like internally for the people that currently work for you to be able to see those, because they're going to be able to see them. So make sure you have all that taken care of. But people may be looking at this as a negative thing. This is not a negative thing. All right. We, for a long time, have been advising our clients to list pay in their advertising. Why? All right. 78% of candidates are less likely to apply if there's no salary listed. Okay. Click-through rates on ads that list at least a pay range will increase by 25 to 30%. So don't be scared of these transparency laws. Listing salary in your advertising and being transparent about that will be a great thing for your talent strategy. So don't be scared of that. And since we have to move fast, unless you guys have a question about that, I'm going to move on to my next point about privacy. So privacy, as we know, with both technicians and drivers, probably the number one way most leads come in is through the phone. right? So the phone call,
Right.
all I mean is the phone call is a big part of how we engage with drivers and engage with technicians and whoever we're engaging with. The laws around who you can call and who you can call through robocalls or automated system, they're always changing. And you
Mhm.
need consent for a lot of outbound call marketing. I'm not going to get into all the nitty gritty. If I would suggest talking to an account manager about all the specifics, and know that if you are
Yeah.
running in Randall Reilly, we go above and beyond to make sure that you are compliant with any
Yes.
data that you're using. But there's a lot of laws around who you can make outbound calls to. I will say, I was talking to Aaron before the call. One thing in the driver world to consider is that an owner operator is considered a business. So
Mhm.
outbound calls to them have slightly different rules. They're a little more lax calling out to a business than they are to an individual company driver. So my second big trend for 2025, and it's very important, even though it's not as fun
Yes.
to talk about as influencer marketing, is making sure you're up to date on transparency laws and advertising around salary. And then make sure you're up to date on privacy laws when it comes to using the phone and making outbound calls.
Yeah. And you may think like we're too small. Nobody's going to sue us for this. We've seen it a lot. We've seen it a
Yes.
lot. Any vendor that you're partnering with, ask them how they are managing their transparency and privacy compliance. You have to ask them that for your own protection.
Yes. Correct. All right. Now, what is the trend for 2025 that we need to kill and let go and never
Leave it in 2024. It's over.
Yep. So what's
Uh,
your
okay, so mine is ignoring the candidate experience post-hire. This is the classic, like, hey, not my problem. So look, if you're moving forward and talent is going to be part of the organizational strategy and not just hiring strategy, you have to care what happens to your candidates once they start. You need to be checking in with them. Do they understand? Was the training there? Working with them to say, hey, talent is part of our overall strategy. So that means, what is our onboarding program? What are their other check-ins? What is their career progression? Have their managers had appropriate training so they know how to deal with issues? All of that is, hey, I'm spending a lot of time and effort and money to bring in quality candidates. And if they're leaving the next day, then you're trying to bail a boat full of holes.
Yeah.
Fishing metaphors are not my forte. I shouldn't have gone there.
Well, at least you didn't try sports. Sports would have been worse.
Sports would have been worse. So you have to, as you become part of that, as part of total organizational strategy, you have to care about the candidate experience. And the kind of metaphor I liked for this is when Google decided that all of their user problems were their problems. And they could have said, hey, people are idiots and they should learn how to spell when they type. And they said, no, all problems are our problem. And they solved that. So if you think of how talent becomes the soul of your organization, all of the things that affect talent become your problem. So you find ways to work with the hiring managers to develop manager training programs, to develop career progressions. You can't just throw candidates over the fence, pat them on the back, and say, good luck, I got my hire, on to the next.
Good. All right. And since we were more verbose than I thought we would be, I'm going to go ahead and go to mine. My 2025 trend that you should leave in 2024 is fuzzy. We'll call it fuzzy cost per hire. So we run into this a lot where people basically, when they're trying to figure out their cost per hire, which you need to know, because if you're going to have a seat at the table, like we talked about, be seen as strategic, you need the right data. So one of those is cost per hire. So what most people do is they go, okay, this is kind of our overall budget on recruiting, and this is how many hires we had come in. So our cost per hire is this. Now that may sound right.
Simple math.
It's not. It's not simple. So I'm going to give like 3 quick things, and this is not going to exhaust everything you need to get an accurate cost per hire. But there's 3 quick things that I want to talk about that make this wrong. First off, most people have a referral program, And then most people, especially I know with fleets, a lot of them end up rehiring old drivers. So if you're not taking those rehires and those referrals out of your cost per hire when you're figuring it out, then you're going to have a way cheaper cost per hire than you actually have, because those referrals did not come as a result of your advertising and marketing. So they shouldn't be included in the results of that. So that's two things that you got to take out. The second one that I say is a big one, and there's more. I want to go to more, but we're running out of time here. The second one that I say is a big one is lumping everything in together, like all rolls into how you figure it out.
Oh,
yeah. Listen, if you're like we talked about earlier, understanding, specifically specific roles that you're hiring for, whether that's a specific lane or a specific type of technician, you need to separate everything out, because each unique role has unique things about it that make it tougher to hire. We actually just worked on this big white paper on what makes a market hard to hire in, which will be coming out very soon. But don't lump it, divide it up as much as you can. You need to understand the cost to hire an owner operator on this specific route at the specific terminal versus this team over here in Wisconsin. You need to understand how all that is different. And then third, another component, and like I said, there's more that people need to understand, is when you're looking specifically at your advertising and what is driving success, you can't use a single touch attribution model. You can't say, well, because the last thing they did was click this link here and go to our landing page and fill out the form, that gets 100% of the credit, because they probably watched a video and they saw your ad here. So employing a multi-touch attribution model will greatly increase the accuracy of how you're determining where you're getting success and what your actual cost per hire is. So a quick recap of everything we covered. Trends that you must pay attention to in 2025: employment branding,
and talent and strategy.
And then influencer marketing. Just quick recap: make sure that it is someone that already has an established influence and trust, and micro is better than macro. And then finally, the other one was make sure you're up to date on transparency laws and privacy laws. And then the things to leave behind are, what was yours, Julie?
Just throwing candidates over the fence.
Yeah, make sure that you invest in the candidate experience past the initial hire. And then mine was being very simplistic with your cost per hire. Dig in, get it right. And there's several things you need to look at to get it right. That's it for us. If anybody has any final questions, we'll hang on just a little bit longer. If you want to ask questions about anything we talked about or anything regarding marketing or recruiting or a trend that you think we should have talked about, throw it in the Q&A. I'm going to launch one final poll before we get out of here, and we will hang around just a little bit longer, Julie, to see if anybody asks questions. Is there anything you would add? Anything you would add to what you've talked about so far?
Well, I had it till I went into we're done with the webinar mode.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I would say it's ask your partners and vendors what data they can provide you to help you get that seat at the strategy table. Because I think a lot of people think it feels monumental, and it does feel a little bit like barging in, whereas other organizations, the senior leadership is going to be coming to you saying, hey, so you have this information, right? I heard that this is important to organizational health and long-term growth, and you don't want to be caught empty-handed.
Yeah.
You want to be ready. So I would say be very proactive about this from both sides, getting the data on the market and understanding the monetary value of what you're providing. Like when we invest in programs, our retention improves by this, which means our cost per hire goes down by X.
Right. And for our final poll, we'll add it to the stage real quick as we're closing here. Do you like Digging Deeper live, or do you prefer the pre-recorded episodes? We got 64% with live, 11% I prefer pre-recorded, and then 23% as long as Dave is there. I don't care.
Can you tell Dave makes the polls?
The poll. Yep. Well, at least I beat out pre-recorded. All right. Well, let's see. We got one question. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting their career in marketing?
All right. I would say just try to do things. So get a side project where you can do whatever you want and go in and say, all right, I need to go from nothing to making this specific action happen, where they need to download something, buy something, find a training ground and go build it out. Build your website, get your email marketing, put together an ad. You're not going to be great at all of it, but it's going to give you a really good idea of how to make things happen, which is what marketing is supposed to be. And it'll give you a framework for thinking about it.
So the other thing I would say, if you're just starting your in marketing, is someone put a funny message in but they asked us not to read it out loud. So
I think I should read it out loud, just not say who said it.
Can we say it? We'll say it, but we'll keep it anonymous. So in response to the
what do you do?
What do you do starting out in a career in marketing? The advice was run. All right. We got another question. As a recruiting service, how can I help my client companies improve their post-hire driver experience without them making me responsible for retention?
So I would say this is a little bit of an interesting question. When we're talking to clients, they're like, well, if they don't stay, then we're not leaving. Then I'm like, okay, well, then we're doing a full audit of your candidate experience, which we have a full service RPO group that's equipped to do that and does consulting services and full talent audits. So we would work with them on that. And then at a certain point, we'd say, all right, if you don't have the infrastructure and internal support to be able to nurture these candidates post-hire, then we're just going to change how we have arranged our agreement for this contract, for this engagement, because we want to make it fair to both parties so that we can have a long-term working engagement. So that's one of the things that we ask a lot of questions up front and really get to understand what the client's needs are and making sure that we can fulfill them in a way that they feel satisfied and we do as well, because that's what long-term partnerships and trust are about.
All righty. Well, with that, I think we will sign off here. We appreciate everybody for joining us. We will actually be back later this month with another Digging Deeper. We're going to do 2 in the month of February, so we will be back soon. Thanks to everyone that joined us today. If we missed something and you want to reach out to me, feel free, let me know. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and sign off from here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. All right. Bye.